Welcome to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you here with us because today we are going to look at a structural shift in the global labor market. It's a shift that challenges the fundamental sequence of how almost all of us were raised to think about career progression.
Yeah, a massive shift. One that really challenges that standard sequence.
Exactly. We've got a stack of varied sources to guide us today, but our primary mission is to unpack a highly practical piece of analysis by Johan Steyn. He's an AI thought leader, and you can find this specific article over at iforbusiness.net. It's titled, The Apprenticeship Comeback in the Age of AI.
Right, and it's a really fascinating read.
Okay, let's unpack this, because for the last half-century, the macroeconomic contract of modern life was completely linear, right?
Right.
You get a degree, that degree acts as a proxy for your competence, you get an entry-level job, and you build a life. But looking at the data presented in this piece, that linear sequence is actively breaking down.
It is breaking down. And what is crucial to understand is that this isn't just a cyclical dip in the labor market. We're looking at a permanent structural transformation of the workforce.
A total rewiring.
Exactly. For decades, the education-to-work pathway relied on a strict chronological divide. The underlying assumption was always that theoretical learning happens first, in total isolation from the market, at a university or a college.
Right, in a bubble.
In a bubble. And then and only then does the practical application happen. The university essentially operated as a bridge, and the degree was the signal to an employer that you possess the baseline cognitive endurance to cross that bridge.
But that sequence is failing now.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is failing. It's failing graduates who are following the old rules, and it is simultaneously failing employers who just cannot find talent capable of executing in a modern, highly volatile environment.
Let me push back on that slightly, or at least play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm looking at the current landscape, the market is absolutely flooded with university graduates. Steyn cites a warning from Tech Central that AI is actively breaking the link between degrees and employment.
Right.
And he also brings in a recent report from the Financial Times that explicitly details a graduate job drought. We are seeing intense competition for entry-level roles. General hiring has softened across the board. So if there is a massive oversupply of graduates desperate for work, why wouldn't employers just scoop them up at a discount? Why go through the friction of changing the hiring model?
That is the exact paradox we need to dissect. The supply of graduates is high, but the nature of the entry-level work they're applying for has been entirely hollowed out by automation.
Hollowed out.
Completely. The Financial Times data isn't just saying companies are hiring fewer people. It's indicating that the fundamental architecture of the bottom rung of the corporate ladder has vanished.
It just doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Think about the historical purpose of junior work. We used to hire 22-year-olds fresh out of college to do basic drafting, simple data entry, preliminary research.
The grunt work.
The grunt work. But the secret was that the company didn't actually need them to do that work to survive. They gave them that work so the juniors could learn the business by osmosis.
So they were essentially paying them to absorb the corporate context while doing the heavy lifting of manual text or data generation.
Precisely. But today, the automation floor has been radically raised. And AI can do that basic drafting or data synthesis in seconds at a fraction of the cost. So the immediate economic incentive for the employer is to automate those tasks.
Which makes sense on paper.
Sure, but by doing that, they have accidentally destroyed the training ground for their future senior employees. The crisis companies are waking up to is this: how do you train a senior strategist when the junior strategy role no longer exists?
That brings up a fascinating friction point, because the skill cycle is moving at an unprecedented velocity right now. We all know that anyone with access to a generative AI tool can produce outputs that look incredibly polished. We're talking about executive summaries and slide decks that mimic the work of a seasoned professional almost instantly.
Which is impressive, but it changes the game entirely.
Right. If the AI is handling the grunt work of text production, the baseline requirement for a human worker shifts. Because AI can do the basic text generation, the real workplace skills are now knowing what to ask, what to verify, what to improve, and crucially, what not to do.
Because the AI lacks context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about the last time you used a generative AI tool to draft a sensitive email to a frustrated client. The AI gave you perfect grammar and a highly structured argument, sure, but it couldn't read the room. It took your human context, your empathy, your specific knowledge of that client's history to look at that draft and realize, I can't actually send this. It's technically accurate, but tonally disastrous.
What's fascinating here is that the human intuition you just described is no longer a soft skill reserved for upper management. It is the new entry-level baseline. Generating the text is just a commodity now.
The actual workplace value lies in the application of critical thinking to that AI output.
Exactly. The necessary skills are knowing how to frame the initial prompt, knowing how to rigorously verify the hallucination-prone information it returns, and knowing how to adjust the output so it aligns with strict compliance standards. And importantly, it requires accountability.
Because an algorithm can't go to jail.
Right. An algorithm cannot be held legally or reputationally accountable if a summary offends a major client or breaches a data privacy law. Only a human professional can shoulder that risk.
And this is where the traditional university model really struggles to keep pace. I mean, relying solely on a theoretical degree in this environment is incredibly risky. Johan Steyn makes this point brilliantly. It's like reading a comprehensive, peer-reviewed manual about swimming, memorizing the physics of water displacement, and then suddenly being thrown into the deep end of a stormy ocean.
You're going to drown.
They're going to drown. Because universities are great at teaching concepts, intellectual rigor, broad formation. But work teaches constraints. Work teaches you how to navigate immovable deadlines, irrational stakeholders, shifting budgets, the messy reality of cross-functional teamwork.
And when you separate theoretical learning from those practical constraints, you end up with graduates who have incredible conceptual knowledge but zero operational judgment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Steyn's proposed solution to this temporal mismatch is the modern apprenticeship, not as a nostalgic trade model. Not someone spending 10 years learning to be a blacksmith.
No, this is an AI-era pathway.
Right. And the market data actually supports this pivot in a massive way. If you look at the recent employer research from Forbes, published in December 2025, the numbers are striking. 46% of employers are planning to expand skills-based hiring in 2026. Almost half the market is actively rebuilding their talent pipelines.
That 46% figure is a structural tipping point.
It is. Employers are actively rating work history as equal to, or even more valuable than, a degree.
It shows that companies are no longer just complaining about a skills gap. They are internalizing the cost of closing it. The paradigm is shifting from learn, then work, to a simultaneous model of learn, earn, learn.
Learn, earn, learn.
Exactly. It's a model perfectly suited for a world where skills expire rapidly and people need income while building capability. What a student learns in their freshman year of a computer science degree might be completely commoditized by software by the time they graduate.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Therefore, getting your first job is no longer the finish line of your educational journey. The first job becomes the start of structured learning, complete with feedback, supervision, and real consequences.
But let's pivot to the specific geographical context highlighted in the research, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Steyn specifically examines this through the lens of South Africa, a market grappling with stubbornly high youth unemployment.
This raises an important question. We have to look at this through the fairness lens. If companies start bypassing universities and absorbing school leavers straight into internal corporate academies, who actually gets access to those first jobs?
That's the friction point.
It's a critical vulnerability. If we are not highly intentional about the architecture of these modern apprenticeships, this shift could drastically widen socioeconomic inequality. Steyn warns that without intentional design, these pathways just consolidate privilege.
Because if an 18-year-old now needs to secure a spot in a prestigious corporate academy instead of a university, the selection criteria become the bottleneck. How do they get chosen if they don't have a degree? Do they need to already know an executive at the firm?
Exactly. Do they need to attend a well-funded high school with an established pipeline?
The danger here is replacing an academic meritocracy, which has its flaws, sure, with a system based entirely on inherited social capital.
That is the crux of the fairness lens. Is this new apprenticeship model going to be a bridge, or is it going to be a gate? Access must be deliberately engineered. It has to be built as a bridge, not a gate restricted to those with existing networks.
We actually see a very clear example of how to engineer that bridge in the October 2025 Say News report cited in the text. It outlines a partnership-driven hospitality internship initiative in South Africa that is showing real results. And it successfully blends real workplace exposure with structured learning.
The defining characteristic there is the partnership model. To avoid the trap of apprenticeships devolving into cheap labor, you need a tripartite structure. Industry bodies define the competencies, educational institutions design the learning modules, and employers provide the practical environment.
It standardizes the learning.
Yes, ensuring it holds value across the entire sector.
And for listeners familiar with the South African business context, we have to distinguish this from traditional corporate social investment, or CSI. Historically, some companies have treated learnerships merely as a compliance tick box for BBBEE scorecards, a line item on the PR budget with no real intention of absorbing those learners.
If it sits in CSI, it is doomed to fail as a labor strategy.
The research makes that very clear. Apprenticeships must be a strategic talent pipeline.
It has to be treated as a core operational strategy housed within the primary business units. The individuals running these programs must be measured on the operational output and retention of these apprentices.
So what does this all mean? We've explored the collapse of the traditional junior role, the economic drivers forcing this shift, the socioeconomic risks. Let's break down the actionable implications for you, the listener, depending on your role, starting with business leaders.
For business leaders, the takeaway is that your talent pipeline must be rebuilt around role-based outcomes. It can't just be cheap labor or a CSI line item. You need clear outcomes, role-based structure, mentorship, and progression milestones.
And what about policymakers?
This must be treated as a core employment strategy. Policymakers need to reduce friction for employers hosting apprentices and ensure portability.
Portability is key, meaning young people don't get trapped in a single company's proprietary badge system. If you spend 3 years at Company A learning their specific AI tools and earn an internal badge, but Company B doesn't recognize it,
You're trapped. You haven't built a portable career. Policymakers must establish universal taxonomies for skills so that credentials are universally legible across the market.
And finally, for parents, students, and you, the listener, the data is not suggesting that a degree is suddenly useless. A degree still holds power as a signal of depth, cognitive endurance, and discipline.
But it is no longer a guarantee.
Right? It's not an insurance policy anymore. The smartest approach is a blended approach. Foundational learning plus real work exposure plus continuous reskilling.
The psychological shift is moving away from the idea of being a finished product upon graduation. The future belongs to those who can keep learning while earning. You are no longer learning to do a job. You are learning how to adapt as the job morphs around you.
As we synthesize Johan Steyn's ultimate takeaway today, it's clear that AI is not ending education. It is simply forcing us to redesign how education connects to opportunity.
It's a necessary redesign, and the true challenge, especially in places like South Africa, is making this high-quality pathway a realistic option for millions, not just a privilege for a few.
We've covered significant ground today. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over. If the modern workplace is shifting to a learn, earn, learn model where dealing with real-world constraints is more valuable than theoretical knowledge, take a look at your own daily life.
It's worth examining.
How long will it be until our professional identities are no longer defined by the institutions we attended, but entirely by a dynamic, open course portfolio of the complex problems we've solved? And more importantly, what apprenticeship are you unknowingly enrolled in right now? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring.